And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're talking about a possible big trade coming for the Commanders as Devonte Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders, star receiver, has requested a trade from the Raiders. And apparently, the Commanders have the fourth best odds in getting Devonte Adams over via a trade. And so we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of getting Devonte Adams over here. And so I think that this is interesting. You can find this on NFL.com, but talked about that Devonte Adams, I guess, in a recent podcast with his fellow wide receiver from the Detroit Lions, was complaining about the Commanders Stadium, and then also too talking about the fan base of the Washington Commanders. And so I thought that that was interesting. I'm sure we would forgive him if we were to trade for him, especially being the dynamic wide receiver that he is. But look, all jokes aside, let's look at some more pros into getting a player like Devonte Adams, because this young man can play some football. Because if you look at his career, especially when you look at years like 2020, 115 catches, over 1,000 yards. He had 18 touchdowns that year. You look at 2018, 111 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns there. And then also too with the Raiders, he had 100 catches in 2022, over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns there. 2023, over 1,000 yards. He had 8 touchdowns. So he's been a very productive wide receiver. And all but 1 year, he has been over 10 yards per reception here. So this guy knows how to go out there and rack up a lot of yards with these receptions and obviously get into the end zone. So, he brings a level that certainly you would think would make the Washington Commanders offense even more dangerous with what they have. And so now that we've talked about some of the things that he can do, we obviously have to look at the cons in this one. And so let's start with the fact that just from the standpoint of just now that the Washington Commanders have kind of got things going, you wonder if you bring Devonte Adams over, is that going to kind of knock off the continuity that this team is really built? And we're talking about momentum, all right? Because right now, Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, this offense, man, they are on a roll and they're putting up some pretty big stats. And so you're hoping that if you were to bring a player like Devonte Adams over, it would certainly help the Commanders continue on that pace. But at this point in time, players like Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, these players are stepping up and they're stepping up big. And it looks like also too, we're also getting some good production too from Zacchaeus as well. And so wide receivers are starting to step up. You don't want to limit that growth, especially with a young player like Luke McCaffrey. So you wonder if taking targets away from those players would actually be a bad thing. And so, excuse me. Next up, you have to look at the long-term plan for the Washington Commanders, because that has to be a big part of the discussion. Because at this point in time, with the GM, Adam Peters, it's no secret here that he wants to come out and he wants to build this team correctly. You could see that, they've made a lot of changes in the offseason. And, we actually have an identity with this football team, something that we have not had in quite some time. And I don't think that this team is going to be interested in giving up multiple draft picks in order to acquire Devonte Adams, because he is 32 years old. And let's face it, I mean, we don't know how much longer he has left in the league. I'm pretty sure he has some years, but you have to think that you could maybe use some of this draft capital and get a player that is going to be maybe as productive, and still you have room to grow with your quarterback. So kind of fits into that window of the youth movement that we currently have. You have to think about that right now with the possibility of bringing Devonte Adams over. All right. And so next up, with the offense rolling, with Jaden Daniels on a roll, with the way that we're running the football, with the way that Noah Brown and these wide receivers are stepping up, would you necessarily need Devonte Adams like that? It's not a need at this point. And so it's more something to just add on to the roster. And sure, it's going to help the team open it up offensively, but I'm not sure that the Commanders necessarily need a wide receiver. I would say, in fact, if they're going to make a trade or they're going to make a big splash, I think the Commanders need to probably be thinking of something more along the lines of defense. And so nothing against Devonte Adams. I would love to have him, but I think that at the end of the day, the Commanders are probably going to be best served going out there and getting, say, a cornerback that is going to help this team defensively, because offensively, I'm thinking that they're figuring something out. I think they're going to get better each week. I've talked about that on prior videos, that they seem to be getting momentum. And I think that that part of the offense is getting figured out, or has been figured out. I think now defensively, getting that identity and getting into what Coach Dan Quinn wants, he may have to make some more personnel changes, and it might start in the secondary. We might need to get an edge rusher, but I think that that might be what the Washington Commanders want to do. And so lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit more about having the fourth best odds to get Devonte Adams. So right now we have the New York Jets, you have the New Orleans Saints, and then you also have the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so I think that the Commanders maybe have the best chance to go get him, because I don't see the Raiders wanting to go ahead and trade him within the AFC. I couldn't see that. Even if it is the Jets, I don't think that they necessarily want to see him in the AFC. You got the Pittsburgh Steelers over there too, and that is an AFC team. But it is a possibility. Look, the Jets do have Aaron Rodgers, a quarterback he's played with. New Orleans Saints, they have Derek Carr. That is an offense that he has played with. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I couldn't see them maybe going after him. Perhaps, I mean, I could see that maybe with George Pickens on the other side of the football, but I don't know if they're going to be wanting to give up some draft compensation, considering that they just gave up some compensation to get Justin Fields. But hey, they were looking at Brandon Ayuk. From what we understand, the deal was pretty much done, but Brandon Ayuk decided to go ahead and ultimately come back to the 49ers. So that is a huge possibility. But the Dallas Cowboys actually might be, I think, the ones that could sneak into the picture, because I think that the Dallas Cowboys, they didn't make any splash in free agency. They didn't make any huge additions. They've lost a lot of stuff over time. And I think that they are looking for something big to kind of energize and spark this team. And so maybe taking a look at Devonte Adams ending up there with the Dallas Cowboys, that wouldn't surprise me, as they were right behind the Commanders. But let me know in the comments what you think. If you think the Washington Commanders could make a trade for him. To be honest with you, I don't know if the Commanders would do it too. And this is another side note that I thought about, but big name wide receivers that they brought in, Pierre Garcon, they brought him over from the Colts. They had Deshaun Jackson, who they got from the Eagles, and then Henry Ellard from back in the day when they got him over. Those are a couple big acquisitions at the wide receiver position that the Washington team has gotten via the free agents, trades, whatever. So I don't know if that Devonte Adams deal is going to happen, but hey, I'm not going to decline the deal if he does come over. I'm just hoping that the Washington Commanders don't give up a lot of their draft capital to get him. And the cap space is not an issue, by the way, if you're wondering that. And so lastly, before we jump out, I want to talk about the injury update for this upcoming game. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with the Browns, but just with us, just some key things on the injury report. Right now we have Brian Robinson Jr. knee. He did not practice. Remember, he has had a pretty big couple games, and I would say that he is a huge part of what we want to do on the ground attack. You have Austin Eckler. He was limited with a concussion. He did miss last week. We're obviously going to need both of those players. A couple groin injuries that kind of limited some players. Percy Butler, groin. Noah Brown, he also had a groin as well. And then, yeah, I mean, that's some of the key notes with what is going on with the injury report going into this game. So let me know what you're thinking about this Devonte Adams trade. And then also, too, with what you're thinking in regards to the injury report, as tomorrow we will be talking a little bit more as to the keys to winning against the Browns at home. This is Rico. This is Washington Commanders Insider. We're going to be talking more Commanders football. Go Commanders, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.